Cisco has added some pretty massive topics to the ICND1 exam in 2013. Let me break down exactly what you need to know. First and foremost, you're now going all the way with IP subnetting. Instead of the old one mask to rule them all in the original ICND1, Cisco's gone all the way with variable-length subnet masking. Take that and now couple it with access control lists being added. First off, you'll want to know the operation of them. Normally a router forwards all traffic all the time. That's what a router does. As soon as you add an access control list, the rules of the game changes and everything gets that default deny all at the bottom of an access. So you'll want to know that. You want to know how to work with wildcard masks. Again, coming back to the IP subnetting and then working backwards with wildcard masks as well as custom wildcard masks, what that looks like. You want to know how to configure the standard and extended access control list. So not just doing the plain old source only restrictions, but also source, destination, port numbers are being added to that. You want to know specifically how to secure remote access, securing your VTY ports using the access class command rather than applying it to an interface using, for instance, like an access group. And of course, now I don't use numbered access list anymore. I only use named because it's so nice to be able to do a show access list command and see the name of it instead of these random numbers. So know how to configure and work with named access control lists as well. And you know what? I didn't even put it at the bottom there. It should be there. Verifying your access list, making sure that they're working, doing a show access list command, seeing how many hits you're getting on each one of those, making sure that it's applied in the right way, in the right direction to an interface. That brings us over to network address translation. Cisco realized that they can't tell you about network address translation if they've taken away the GUI. They're no longer explaining the security device manager or SDM web interface to configure a Cisco device. It's all command line, and you can't configure NAT without knowing access lists. So you'll want to understand what NAT and PAT are all about, and every single one of the NAT configurations. So static NAT, allowing individual ports or complete IP addresses through to access internal resources. Dynamic NAT, assigning a pool of addresses that you can translate to. And of course, the most popular configuration in the world, PAT, using overload, not only with, for instance, a pool of addresses. So once it loads one up and uses all the port numbers, now it's going to jump over to the next one. But also you can use PAT, and you'll want to know how to use PAT on an interface. So I can say, well, just send it all out that interface and overload it so I can share that interface's IP address with everybody. Finally, NAT troubleshooting, do like, for instance, a clear IP NAT translations or show IP NAT translations to see what's going on. Next up, VLANs have made their way into ICND. One of my favorite topics. I'm kind of happy that it's there. Understanding what a VLAN is, you'll have to look at flat networks and say, well, okay, it's gotten too out of control. We've added voice over IP, all that kind of stuff. Let's bust out our VLANs and separate the network up. Basic VLAN design. Now, I'm saying basic like, ooh, it's a VLAN. Look what it does. You know that when you get into the CCNP level, you start getting into specific, private VLANs, looking at wiring closet and do the local VLAN design. Your VLANs don't span cat. You don't know. None of that. Base, ooh, look, there's a VLAN. That's kind of the design you're looking at. Trunking with 802.1q, so you can let your VLANs go to wireless access points, go between switches and all that. VLAN configuration, setting up global config mode, VLAN command, naming the VLAN. VLAN routing options, very interesting. Now introducing the three levels of routing, or three different ways of routing. How's that? A router with individual interfaces for each VLAN. Yeah, who does that? VLANs with a router on a stick. Now that's been the traditional way we've always seen, but also now layer 3 switching is introduced, not configured in ICND1. The configuration is going with that same old router on a stick. Come on, don't make fun of it. Router on a stick works. I've done it a lot, even in the real world. For small offices, you don't have a layer 3 switch, man, this thing works great. So DHCP, piece of cake. What is DHCP? How to set up a DHCP server on a router, set up the pool of addresses in global configuration mode. Big one here, DHCP helper addresses. That's Cisco's way of doing a DHCP relay between the different subnets, which is big. That's a big concept. So they add that one in there, and then monitoring, checking out your binding, seeing if there's conflicting addresses, all of that. Man, I'm talking fast. Let's look at the routing world. Distance vector gone. We don't talk about RIP anymore, other than an honorable mention saying there used to be a protocol named RIP. Clap, clap. There's your jingle. Let's move on to OSPF. Link state is now the way, and OSPF is the protocol that everybody's using. So high-level overview to where not nitty-gritty details, not even multi-area at this point, or even a hint of it. It's like, hey, there's a protocol called OSPF. It forms neighbor. Isn't that sweet? Now let's get into the single area configuration using even your wildcard mask skill that you learned from Access to be able to specify where OSPF is running, and then how to verify it, checking your neighbors, checking your routing table, checking what interfaces it's running on. Again, basic verification, essentially looking at as trying to be as simple as RIP used to be, but now using OSPF. Then we dive right into IPv6. Cisco actually added this to the ICND1 much sooner than I thought they'd do. I thought it'd be a little bit longer, but they get into the features of IPv6. Why do we have IPv6? Shortage of IPv4 addresses. How do you kind of transition, make that move to IPv6? What the addressing looks like, as in looks like look at that address. Wow, it's big. How do you make it smaller? Talking about the zero reduction, removing zeros to try and make it a manageable IP address. Looking at the address types like the global, the link local, that kind of thing. How to assign the IPv6 addresses where you can go static, you can go into the auto configuration, the stateless, the stateful. I mean, a lot of cool stuff, kind of the stateful being the replacement for DHCP. Basic IPv6 configuration, basic, like assign an address. Ooh, look, there it is, we're done. Static IPv6 routing, to where now you look at the same technology you saw with IPv4, but applying it to IPv6. When I say OSPF v3 flyby, like OSPF 4 IPv6, it's literally just that. Like, I would say once you know this side of the game, configuring OSPF v3 is a piece of cake. And there it is. If you want to see more, coming over to cbtnuggets.com. I actually have the entire new ICND1 series done. You can expand it, look at each video, see what's in it. I hope this has been informative for you, and I'd like to thank you for viewing.